Hey guys, so I came across this LinkedIn post here that I want to break down the logic failure in it. And we're going to go, and by the way, right off eh, beginning this video, this is not a direct criticism of the person themselves, or is this meant to be personal? This is simply taking the ideas and the thoughts conveyed in this post and breaking down what the logic failure is. So, as you know, AI governance has been a really big thing. Everybody has an AI governance title, but the governance itself is the same. It's just more scalable failure when you include AI, the automation of AI. So let's take it. What is this post really saying? First of all, it includes an image that's very complex. It includes mechanical, mathematical, it includes a nice quote by the Goodhart's law, and it makes it look legitimate. It gives it authority and credentials. So right off the bat, it's quite complex. It looks like the person knows what they're talking about. So let's listen to it, right? And it talks about the hidden infrastructure behind aligned AI. So right there, it's trying to frame our thinking into this is legitimate and this is important and I know what I'm doing. And I called out exactly what the failure is. But upon closer investigation, you'll notice that, let's go through it and read it. AI governance is not what you think. Part one. Everyone talks about AI safety like it's built on rules, ethics, and control layers. This is such a loaded sentence, but we'll come back to it. It's not. What companies like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google DeepMind are actually doing is far more subtle and far more important to understand. The reality, AI does not follow rules. It operates on probability distributions and includes a nice complex mathematical algorithm here, right? Every output you see is the result of statistical likelihood, not moral reasoning. So, in essence, this part here, it's saying that AI doesn't follow rules, it follows probability. That's 100% true. Remember, we can state facts and we can state what is sometimes, but the conclusion we take away, the breakdown, now will follow, okay? And what it's saying is that every output you see is a result of statistical likelihood, not moral reasoning. What does morality, which is right and wrong, have anything to do with AI, which is supposed to be objective, right? We'll come back to that. So, what is AI governance? It's not enforcement. It's shaping training data, designing reward models, applying methods like reinforcement learning from human feedback, and using frameworks like constitutional AI. In simple terms, what this post is saying is governance is simply shaping what responses become most likely, which, if we tie back to the earlier, it's about probability distribution. So the post is saying, listen, if I want to make AI governance work and work properly, all I have to do is shape the probability, right, of the outcomes, the weighing mechanism of the probability distribution. That's literally what it's saying. But it's actually not that simple. Because alignment or probability distribution to alignment, which is what the organization wants, are engineered through feedback loops, is what this person is saying. Let's change the input models, right? That's their claim. And then they're naming the illusion of alignment in AI appears to be ethical, safe, logical, and self aware. But under the hood, it's replicating patterns, it's optimizing outputs, and it's simulating reasoning, not actually understanding anything. Correct, but you understanding is very important. And it's saying AI doesn't understand it, right? So why this matters? Because the illusion creates trust, dependence, and reduced scrutiny. And that leads to real risks, adversarial failures, distribution shifts, which are documented here in number 8 of their infograph, and reward misalignment. This is the kicker right here. This is a complete misunderstanding of Goodhart's law. And we'll hit each of these misconceptions one at a time, but I wanted to read the perspective of the core claim of this post. The core insight, AI governance is not controlling decisions. It is controlling what decisions become statistically likely. So they're saying the basics of true good AI governance and to avoid failure in governance period is not just to control the decisions, but to control the probability mechanisms of how those decisions are weighed, meaning the outputs, right? The bottom line is we are not enforcing alignment, we are optimizing for aligned looking behavior, right? What do you think? Is current AI governance enough, or are we overestimating how aligned these systems really are? So, good questions, right? So, let me summarize what the post is saying. AI doesn't follow rules, it follows probability, which is true. Governance is shaping distributions. Alignment is engineered through feedback loops. And the risks that fall into this is Goodhart's law and reward misalignment, right? In essence. So, the first break is if we apply the Icepic framework to this, we look at ontological errors. So the first issue isn't technical, right? Like using probability mechanisms, which this article talks to and includes a lot of mathematical algorithms, right? Um, they assume that alignment is a real definable thing. And they assume that governance is something you can apply to AI. And eventually, they assume that control exists through system design. But these are not the actual realities of AI and the human interaction. These are constructed categories that are actually working within the system itself. We'll break this down into more detail. If you're still with me, that means you're curious and there's something here that feels off, so that's good. If you don't question what alignment is, everything after becomes self reinforcing. So, what is not looked at and thought about is what is alignment to begin with? Are we overestimating how aligned these systems really are? But what is alignment? What is exactly being requested? Is it the rewarding mechanism that's currently happening? Ontology says you have to define what alignment looks like. And what do organizations do today? They create KPIs. That, by definition, according to Goodhart's law, is not that it's a reward misalignment. It's that alignment is to the reward, which is to the KPI. And simply switching these two around changes the meaning altogether, right? So even the post, the understanding of it says that misalignment is in essence alignment to the KPIs, right? Not to what alignment is, not investigating what alignment really means. Now, how does it do it? It uses a lens. It uses a lens of technicality. It uses models, distributions, RLHF. And what does that do? It converts the uncertainty of the alignment into a mechanism. It simply tells you how it does that. It converts probability into a process. Well, if we just change our governance inputs and our governance way, probability way, then the process will change. The outcome will be different, right? And it converts behavior, right, into the design of a governance. So it's saying if the illusion of alignment, let's see, it says the core misalignment gap, AI understands ethics, actually is AI, it's very hard to read this, by the way. It mimics ethical language, right? AI follows principles. AI samples aligned patterns. That's correct. Why this becomes a governance risks. Systems are deployed at scale. True alignment is not verifiable from the outside. By the time failures appear, it's too late. So the real control layer, they're saying, is through data curation, training loops, and I can't tell what this is, but some kind of regulation, right? So the real control layer, what we actually control is this, which is mathematics something, right? But in practicality, it's bigger than that because just by explaining it, you're not creating true control, true changes. What you're doing is you're creating the illusion of control. Are you saying that if I do data curation, then your decisions are going to be better? They're still going to be limited or bounded by that particular data curation. So now you've taken human judgment that says this data is good and this data is not. But at that moment, you're making a decision of the data that's accessible to that AI. You've created a boundary that it itself may create misalignment to future decisions. Does that make sense? So the boundaries you set the decisions, the constraints within where the decisions can be made. And training loops, what are you training on? Right? Next is Goddard's law misunderstanding. They say that it's a reward misalignment. That's not what Goddard's law actually says. It says alignment to the measure becomes the problem. So, how do you measure AI governance success? We are optimizing for aligned looking behavior, that's true. But how are you going to implement AI governance in such a way that checks for true alignment? That true behavior exists. The minute you create a target, which is what Goodhart's law says, the minute you create a KPI, the minute you create a metric, you are literally saying you're asking people to change their behavior, not to look at what needs to be done, but how do I change behavior to meet that particular KPI? That's the beginning of misalignment right there. So the system is not misaligned, it's perfectly aligned to exactly the wrong thing. Now, as I said already, KPIs don't measure success. They tell people exactly what to do. It stops asking what needs to be done and it says what exactly is going to satisfy the metric. And there's ways around it, but I'd be curious to see what this says. This is saying take AI and change the reprioritization or regulation, training loops, change the um, data curation, change all that, and then your alignment will be correctly aligned, right? Now, this is where it's I'm sure you felt this before where it feels like things are complete, but they're not actually done. That's where the rubber meets the road. Is at which layer in practical and operational perspective are you actually changing it? Are you changing it at this level, which again is the falling prey to the exact same failures of boundaries when it comes to alignment? I think there was a comment in here which also made the same issue. This person here says that they agree with the actual post, but they're saying that at the model level, we're shaping probability, not enforcing behavior. Where I think it starts to break down is where that assumption carries into runtime. That's a good point to say, but you could see how they failed here, where the plane is allowed to go. First of all, what's a plane? And where is it going and why? Right? So they're saying governance is at the level of the air traffic control system. Hey, we have a plane and we need to go over here because remember, models, data, rules, weighing probabilities already exist. The plane already exists within it, but nobody's asking what's a plane? Where are we going with it? How do we measure a plane? Right? And I think that's the layer that's missing here, right? Without that layer, you're relying on the aircraft to self-regulate in a shared airspace. Again, what's an aircraft? What is it for? This is the ontological layer, which if it fails there, it propagates all the way down. Definition of traceability. All metrics should be built upon what are we trying to achieve, but don't set it because then people will align to the reward incorrectly. So the governance shapes outcomes. No, it doesn't. It shapes what becomes statistically likely. If we're saying we're changing all this, you're simply doing exactly the same failure where you're shaping what is statistically likely based on the governance you've set. I'm saying governance needs to be much earlier, where governance says why, what, how, when. Then you figure out how to create things around it without creating the boundaries that we are set into now, right? Because ultimately, that's not governance here either. Compared to all the rest, this is not governance either. This is probability steering more to your alignment, but it still will become if you steer probability, it's only true um, a certain time, a certain set, a point in time is what I'm trying to say. Because every time you restrict the ability to make a decision by setting boundaries of any kind, you are restricting its ability to move past it. And so in future time, you are preventing its ability to scale in decision making and decision accuracy. That's the kicker, right? So it's a false reality to say, let's define governance in such a way where you are falling prey to the exact same thing you're describing here, only calling it different, right? So this post explains the system and it does a good job at that, but it never actually questions the assumptions that are outside of it, nor does it question the assumptions of its conclusion, which, if looked at closely, they will see that their suggestions actually fall prey to the same logic failure as stated that they've pointed out. So we have to be careful with that, because what we're doing is that we're not just governing AI, we're shaping what appears governable. That's the danger, is that we think we have control, right? But we actually don't solve control by doing this. We just make it feel like we did. This is the part where I was talking about before, where it's complete but not quite done. We feel like we did. Why didn't it work out? Why isn't it working? You don't control the system itself. You simply control what it's likely to produce, exactly the probabilities of it. So if you're going to try and change the probability of something by implementing the same as what caused it to be bounded by those probabilities, you're falling prey to the same logic failure. So if alignment is defined through metrics, what exactly are we aligning to? That's the question.